Are you part of Group 7? Find out now. Congratulations, that sentence is the start of something gentle but profound. If it landed with a small, wary spark inside you, stay with that feeling. You might have been carrying a quiet curiosity your whole life, a low-grade question under everything you do. Why do I feel different? Why does time not move for me the same way it moves for others? What does it mean when crowds drain me and sudden endings follow my choices? Group 7 is not a club with secret passwords, and it is not a horoscope that tells you your future. Think of it instead as a descriptive tag for a pattern in the unfolding story of our collective and your personal path, a stage, a role, a way of being that many people move through as the world shifts. If you are part of Group 7, you are one of those quieter presences who holds the edge of stability when things around you tilt. You do not need to perform. Your influence is subtle and real. If that opening line landed, hold that feeling for a moment. Later, if you want, type 7 in the comments and let others know this reached you. Listen to this as an invitation to recognize, not to fix. Over the next while, I will guide you through signs, sensations, stories, and reflections so you can see whether the pattern fits. I will offer gentle prompts you can use to journal or to share, and small practical framings that help translate past pain into a kind of training. Nothing here is a guarantee. Everything here is an interpretation meant to give meaning, not to label you forever. You are likely to recognize these sensory and social signatures first because they show up early and persist. You have always noticed sound more sharply than others. A room full of people talking becomes a wash of textures, and after half an hour you feel frayed at the edges. Bright fluorescent lights feel like they scrape the inside of your skull. Processed food leaves you oddly depleted for days instead of hours. You might find yourself stepping outside at parties more often than staying, not because you dislike people, but because your nervous system prefers lower volume. You feel colors, timbres, and emotional atmospheres in a way that reads like a second channel under the visible scene. As a child, you were the kid who turned away from the forced group game. You sat on the periphery, not because you were excluded, but because the movement of the crowd felt like a pressure that pulled something inside you apart. In school, there may have been a teacher who called you shy or quiet, when actually you were conserving contact, protecting a tender interior that matured differently. In the workplace, you were the one colleagues rely on to notice tone and to de-escalate simmering tensions without pomp. At family gatherings, you sometimes notice a shift in mood before anyone else does. You are drawn to find a quieter corner or to steer a conversation gently into safer ground.
Imagine walking into a bustling market. For most people, it is color and motion. For you, it is an overlay of vibrations, a low hum of worry from one vendor, the sharpness of someone's anger near the spice stall, the sweet melancholy behind an elderly woman's eyes under the awning. That overlay is often exhausting, but it is also an indicator. You are receiving more information than most, and your system is wired to sense subtle states before they become words. Take a moment now and jot this down. When was the first time you felt overwhelmed in a crowd? What sensory detail has always been distinct for you? Sound, light, smell, emotional tone? 2 or 3 lines are enough. This simple act of noting makes the pattern visible. Activation signs arrive in small physical ways. They are not always dramatic, but they are persistent, and they often show up during moments of recalibration. You may feel a gentle pressure across your forehead, like a soft band tightening just above the eyes. It is not painful, but it is noticeable, a subtle heaviness that can come when you are asked to hold attention for longer than feels natural. Ear ringing, too, often appears as a soft, distant bell. It increases in crowded spaces and wanes when you withdraw. Dizziness in large gatherings, a sensation of being unmoored when too many energetic inputs converge, is another sign. These are not medical diagnoses. They are subjective sensations many Group 7 people report as their perceptual field sharpens. Emotionally, you might find that atmospheres download to you quickly. You enter a room and immediately feel whether people are tired, anxious, hopeful, or guarded. You see motives and faintly predict undercurrents that others do not notice. Sometimes this discernment is a gift. Other times it isolates you. You see what others hide, and the loneliness of that vision follows you home. What to notice? When you feel pressure in the forehead, pause and breathe. When a faint ringing appears, note the context. Was there a crowd, a loud space, an emotionally charged event? Ask yourself, did this sensation arrive after a major life change or when I was about to make a decision? Write that down. Over time, a map appears, not a diagnosis, but a set of signposts that help you interpret what your body and perception are saying. Here is a short image. A woman named Leela, anonymized to honor many lives, told me she used to leave concerts early because by the midpoint, a fog of pressure would settle behind her eyes.
She learned to notice that when it cleared, her clarity about relationships would deepen for days afterward. The sensation was a signal of processing, and the processing was doing quiet work. Another story, a man in his 30s, quiet by nature, described soft ear ringing that would crescendo when he visited his childhood home for holidays. He later realized that the ringing was linked to an inherited family tension he absorbed without words.
Recognizing the signal allowed him to create small boundaries, leaving earlier, sitting outside with a cup of tea, breathing through the signal until it ebbed. These were not bedrock cures, they were adjustments that respected his limits and supported his integrity. This was not punishment, it was preservation. Your life history reads like a script written with careful preservation in mind. Isolation in childhood and adolescence is often reframed here not as social failure, but as quarantine designed to protect an inner blueprint. Think back to the adolescent who chose solitude over the crowd. That time alone was not always lonely by accident. Sometimes it functioned as a crucible. In quietness, your senses could develop resolution. In withdrawal, you practiced sovereignty. You kept a portion of yourself intact while the world practiced loud conformity. A micro-story. A teenager who moved frequently because of family instability found themselves consistently sitting out of team sports. Trainers called it disinterest. Later, they recognized it as preservation. By avoiding highly performative scenes, they maintained an interior compass that could later be trusted when life demanded leadership in subtle, stabilizing ways. Another brief vignette. A child who retreated to a makeshift fort in the backyard, reading under flashlight, learned patterns of attention and patience that would later translate into steadying presence in crisis. The fort was a small quarantine, a sacred pocket where the blueprint remained unaltered by peer pressure. When you frame isolation this way, the loneliness does not vanish, but its interpretation shifts. The solitude that once felt like exclusion becomes a strategy of protection. You did not simply miss out, you preserved a place inside that would be essential for what comes next. This was not punishment, it was preservation. Wounds function like lessons in a carefully arranged curriculum. Betrayal, heartbreak, illness, financial collapse, humiliation. Each of these experiences can be read as training modules that cultivate specific tools. The wounds hurt, certainly, but within their pain, skills germinate. Betrayal develops discernment. When someone you trusted breaks a promise, you are forced to refine your ability to read intention and to differentiate between facade and integrity. You learn to sense inconsistencies earlier. You may become skilled at spotting mismatches between words and energy. Reflect for a moment. Recall a betrayal and the intuition it taught you. How did that lesson help you later with someone else's false charm or with a professional agreement? Heartbreak cultivates sovereignty. When the center of your affection shatters, you discover where your personal boundaries must live. After heartbreak, those quiet practices of self-possession, returning to rituals that hold you, naming needs without guilt, become your scaffold.
Write a line. How did a past heartbreak help you hold steady when someone else's needs sought to eclipse your own? Illness, whether brief or chronic, can hone embodiment. Bodily limits teach you patience, listening, and the ability to translate inner sensations into care that respects the whole person. If you experienced a recovery or a sustained period of convalescence, notice what discipline it taught you. The attention to small restorations, the honoring of rhythms rather than pushing through. Financial collapse or sudden loss develops resourcefulness. When steady ground disappears, you learn to find leverage in small margins, to rearrange and to see options where others see shortage. Sit down and write, what creative solution did you find in a moment of scarcity? Humiliation, public or private, cultivates humility and resilience. Being seen at an exposed point of vulnerability forces you to reconcile self-worth with external opinion. Over time, humiliation can become a quiet teacher that reduces the need for external validation and deepens internal authority. After each of these mini lessons, take one sentence and jot the practical skill you gained. These sentences become a ledger of competence, not a tally of damage. Many of you have survived what feel like improbable moments. You walked away from an accident that should have done worse. You recovered from a sudden illness with an unexpected pace. You escaped a relationship collapse that would have consumed most people. These survivals are not luck alone. They are often timeline-preserving mechanisms that allowed your core mission, quiet, stabilizing presence, to continue. Consider a woman who walked out of a car accident with minor bruises while the vehicle she had been in shattered. Weeks later, she realized that the timing had spared her from a life event that would have forced her into a role she was not yet ready to play.
Or a small business owner who faced near bankruptcy and found a niche pivot that preserved the most essential elements of their work. The near miss was not an accident, but a redirection in the script. These stories are not meant to romanticize suffering. They are meant to respect survivals as evidence of an underlying pattern that you have been scaffolded through difficulty in ways that require grace to recognize. When you learn to interpret improbable survival as preservation, you move from bewilderment to understanding. This was not punishment, it was preservation. Where do these patterns converge into a role? In the wider framework of collective awakening, different people take different functions. Some are catalysts who call things into motion visibly, others are amplifiers who broadcast messages widely. Group 7 tends towards the stabilizer, not the loud leader on stage, but the one who, by being present, holds the edge of calm and organizes energy without spectacle. Imagine a family dinner that has begun to spike into argument.
Voices rise. Someone cuts in with an accusation. You enter the room quietly and take a seat. You do not attempt to perform or to dominate the scene. You simply shift posture, soften tone, hold eye contact in a way that invites others to mirror steadiness. The argument dissolves into conversation. People notice, vaguely, the temperature has cooled. The role you play was not visible on a list of achievements, but it was essential. Picture a workplace where a sudden deadline has created panic. Meetings multiply, tension tightens. A person from Group 7 organizes the folder system, clarifies action steps with an unflappable voice, and offers small, steady encouragements. The panic recedes. The team's momentum recovers. Recognition may come or may not, but the energy was real, and the stabilizer's presence shaped outcomes. These scenes are not about being a fixer or a rescuer. They are about holding a field. You influence without grand pronouncements. The quiet work of stabilizing is a practice of subtlety, boundary setting with softness, steady attention rather than dramatic intervention, and the willingness to bear discomfort so others might breathe. If you have ever walked into a tense space and noticed the tension ease without you saying much, this is your signature at work. Notice how often you translate internal steadiness into external regulation, and how often that has changed trajectories for others in ways that were not loudly celebrated. Life patterns for Group 7 follow a rhythm that often feels like late blooming and abrupt realignments. Timing is a key motif here. Things may lag, then snap into alignment with little warning. You might experience a long season of perceived stagnation, only to have a pathway open suddenly, without the slow march most people expect. Think of timing as a slow simmer, not an immediate boil. Your growth may not follow calendars, degree tracks, or conventional milestones. Instead, experiences arrive by recalibration. Sudden moves, abrupt endings, doors closing that feel like losses, and open into spaces better aligned with your inner architecture. Microstory. A person in their 40s left a decades-long career and within months discovered a calling that fit their temperament perfectly. What looked like failure externally, resignation, uncertainty, was actually a clearing. Another person found their creative voice only after a series of relationship endings forced a re-examination of priorities. The timing felt late in ordinary terms, but in terms of alignment, it was exactly right. How to read abrupt endings. When a chapter ends quickly, ask, what has this preserved for you? What self or skill was protected by the abruptness? Is this a clearing moving you toward a role where your steady presence will be of greater use? Integration is about turning insight into manageable practice. This is not a prescription for quick fixes. It is a set of low-risk habits that help you honor your pattern while living fully. Start with journaling prompts. After each major day, spend 5 minutes answering one question. What did I notice today that felt energetically heavy or light? Where did I conserve energy, and where did I give it away? Keep the answers brief. The point is to build pattern recognition. Reflective prompts you might use: when did I feel most drained today, and what preceded it? What small action helped me recover? How did I inadvertently soothe someone without intending to? These questions do two things. They teach you what to protect, and they train you to see your stabilizing impact in the world. Boundaries are not about withdrawal, they are about sovereignty. Practice small, clear boundaries that protect your capacity, reducing time in overstimulating environments when you can, declining invitations when attending would trade your steadiness for anxiety, and designing rest rituals that restore rather than numb. These are not clinical directives, they are practical experiments you can try and adjust. Gentle pacing is essential. If you are used to late blooming, resist urgency. Celebrate micro-progress. If a big shift is hinted at, allow time for integration rather than pushing for full transformation overnight. Stabilizers need incubation periods. Cultivate a small supportive community.
2 or 3 people who understand that your presence is quiet but essential. They do not have to be spiritual specialists or therapists. They can be friends who can give you honest feedback and who respect your need for recalibration. Share one small observation with them each month. Practice giving and receiving in ways that do not exhaust you. Here are a few quick, practical exercises that are low risk and speak to the stabilizer role. Write a 1-minute note to someone after a tense interaction to acknowledge something positive. Take a short walk after a crowd experience to give your system time to settle. Practice a 5-minute grounding sequence where you name 5 things you can see, 4 you can touch, 3 you can hear, 2 you can smell, and 1 you can taste, not as a ritual, but as a quick resensitization. Keep in mind, none of these practices promise immediate miracles. They are modest tools to support endurance and clarity. This was not punishment, it was preservation. Before we close, let us weave all these threads together in a recapitulation that helps shift the weight of past confusion into a posture of meaning and agency. Your early sensitivities, the way certain lights, sounds, and crowds have always felt more intense, are not mere quirks. They are a high-resolution lens through which you perceive layers others may miss. That lens can be exhausting, but it is also a gift in calibration. You sense the small imbalances that, if left unattended, would cascade.
Your preservation instincts in childhood and adolescence are not evidence of backwardness, but evidence of protection. You kept a part of yourself intact so it could serve in later stages. That inner blueprint, sheltered from consensus pressures, became a reservoir of steadiness. Wounds that once felt random and cruel now read as curriculum. Betrayal trained discernment, heartbreak trained sovereignty. Illness and hardship trained embodiment, adaptability, and resourcefulness. Each wound taught you a tool. When you place these tools in your hands and name them, you no longer carry damage only. You carry qualifications. These qualifications do not trump others' experiences. They simply indicate the specific expertise you developed through difficulty. Improbable survivals are signposts of timeline preservation. Where others see luck, you can begin to see pattern. The universe, chance, or whatever you name the invisible choreography, shifted events so that your stabilizer role remained viable. That is not an exaltation. It is an observation that brings relief. You are not abandoned in chaos. Something kept you in the arrangement you now inhabit. As a stabilizer, your work is quietly foundational. You will seldom be the loudest voice in the room, but you will be the one who, by holding calm, allows others to step into clarity. This role asks for humility, not martyrdom. It asks for discretion, not invisibility. You stir the waters without causing waves. You steady without owning the outcome. Understanding these patterns gives you leverage. You can interpret abrupt endings as realignments rather than failure. You can honor late blooming as timing rather than lag. You can recognize activation sensations as meaningful signals rather than frightening anomalies. With this map, you become capable of making smaller choices that preserve your capacity and larger moves that align with your stabilizing influence. Now take another journaling moment. Write a short paragraph answering this prompt. How does the idea of being a stabilizer change the story you tell about your past? What is one small boundary you can set this week to protect your energy? These 2 sentences will be a bridge between insight and action. If you are wondering whether you must announce this identity publicly, the answer is no. The stabilizer's work is rarely performative. You can hold the knowledge privately, use it to choose better rhythms, and let your presence speak more than labels. If you do choose to share, do so in ways that honor humility and invite others to reflect rather than recruit them into a category. Tell us a small sign you recognize in yourself. A forehead pressure, a tendency to leave crowds early, an abrupt life recalibration, so others who feel similarly can find company. You were not miswired. You were not mistaken. Your timing, your sensitivities, your survivals, they all matter. Your history has meaning. This is your preparation. Keep that in your pocket as you move through the weeks ahead. Be gentle with yourself. Pay attention. Preserve your blueprint. Your quiet steadiness changes more than you know.